Honza said that we should make it more accessible to beginners.
Yes.
Since there's... Who's a beginner here?
Who's a beginner in documenting?
Yeah. So this talk or this discussion will be on a bit lower level than what Mikey said. It'll be like what are the tools you can use to get started with documentation. So I'll be presenting 3 different tools. The first one of those is Markdown, which is a fairly recent project that is pretty simple. You write Markdown. I don't know how easily you can see that. Okay. So who here does not know Markdown? Okay, so Markdown is a lightweight text format. You use this for headings, you use these for emphasis, and it's pretty simple. You write pages like this, then you give it a configuration file, which works a bit like this, but you can leave most of it out. And then you run the tool and you get docs like this. What's nice about this tool is you can edit it.
Is it anyhow related to wiki syntax?
A bit.
Wiki
I
is
mean,
like a flavor of
all of these text formats are related to each other. So it has development server, so you save the text, you reload it in the browser, and it appears right there, which is pretty good. The problem is that it uses Markdown. The problem you'll have if you use Markdown is that if you want to write something more complex, like a book, something with tables, lots of for example, notes or something like that, Markdown doesn't do that. You can drop to HTML in Markdown, but it's not very fun. Also, Markdown is not very well specified. Everybody has their own flavor of Markdown. Like, there's GitHub flavored Markdown, and this page lists all the differences from normal Markdown. There's quite a lot. So it's nice for simple stuff, like if you need to throw 2 or 3 pages on the web, go for this. If you want to do something complex, maybe start with something complex at the beginning, so you don't have to convert later. So what's the more complex thing that you can use? That's Sphinx. How many of you are not Python developers? Quite a lot. So I'll be telling this to you. Sphinx is what we use in the Python world for documentation. If you write a project in Python, most likely you'll use Sphinx to document it. It's really, really nice, really mature project. It has lots of tools around it. If you write a documentation in it, like the Python documentation is written in Sphinx. If you have a project, you can host it on this site called Read the Docs, which has documentation for all kinds of projects, from some really simple ones to some really complex ones. I think the docs are pretty good. I originally wanted to do a live demo, as Mikey said, but if you want to get started with Sphinx, just read this, and then you'll know everything you need to know. Sphinx uses Restructured Text, which I have here somewhere. which looks kind of like Markdown. It uses a different syntax for the headings, a different syntax for links. It has these 4 dots for literal text and stuff like that. People are generally not too happy writing in restructured text if they are used to Markdown, because it's a bit finicky. You need to know where to leave new lines, and some things are not possible, like if you have a link, you can't highlight a thing inside the link text and stuff like that. But it's extensible, so if you do things like code documentation, it's really nice to do that in restructured text. If you need something else, like automatically generate a chart or something like that, you can write a plugin for Sphinx and it'll do that for you, which is really nice. What do I have here? Okay. This is code documentation. It's some kind of function. So what Sphinx will do for you if you document a function is put a source link, so you can see what the function source looks like, and you can see in the source that okay, let me see the source for this. So this is how you document a class. So this is a class, and then you can either put the text for the class in the restructured text file, or you can have this text in the doc string of the class and use auto class, and it'll pull all the text from your actual source. You can do the same with like attributes and stuff like that. So if you're writing a library, this is really nice to use. The other thing it's good for is structure. If you have chapters and sections and stuff like that, you can do these talk trees and say in what order the chapters go. So these are pretty much file names. What was I going to say? A tiny problem with documentation structured like this. If you have a tree, you have a main page, and then you have kind of introduction, tutorial, reference section. And, the tutorial has its own sections. It's arranged in this kind of a tree, which is good for some things and bad for others. If you want to write documentation for end users, which see something, they don't really know what it does, like there's a button on some dialogue and they want to find out what that does, they want to search for that, or they want to follow some links for the documentation for this button, and sometimes the tree you make doesn't really reflect the user's thought process. So it is nice if you have the ability to do a graph instead of a tree. Like to the button you can get in different ways from the main page. Does that make any sense? Yeah, and if you want to do that, one more thing. That of course doesn't work for things like books. If you want to print something out, then you need to have a structure like in the traditional tree. If you want to do documentation online or where users install it, then you can use this other tool, which is called Mallard. Mallard is what the GNOME desktop uses for their help, and it has this kind of graph structure. I took these slides from a talk about it. So this is the traditional structure. What you want is kind of like this, where there are multiple ways to get to a page from the index. And what Mallard does is it takes it one step further and has the pages link to link to the pages that contain them. So, for example, if you write a plugin, write documentation for it, then that documentation can insert itself into the main docs. I'll show an example. So we have an index page, which will look like this when rendered. By the way, Mallard is XML. Anything structured pretty much needs to be in XML. So developers won't touch it. But there's a nicer syntax called duck type that converts to this XML. It makes it almost like Markdown. Okay, so I have this page, and I have another page here that says this links to the guide page called index. When I convert that, and this is topic, then this index guide page automatically got a link to this topic page. So I can like that. There's my page. Automatically gets a link back again. Yeah. If I have another page, this one, it automatically inserts itself again. So you can have this kind of branching structure that's more suited to docs you don't read in a single sitting. Like if you have a tutorial, you'll probably want to go from the beginning to the end. If you want to have reference documentation, then you want something like this. And here's some things that Mallard can do. One bad thing about Markdown is that it's not easy to do nested lists with multiple paragraphs, stuff like that. Since Mallard is XML, the author really thought about how to nest things properly and how to make it extensible, how to make it nice for tools. For example, if you want to translate a Mallard document, then you won't be completely lost like with Markdown. Yeah. One thing, this nice syntax for Mallard is still evolving. Some things are not finished. I think this inline syntax, like in Markdown, you would just use asterisks to highlight something. Here you have to do $M. I hope that will be fixed, or at least we'll be able to use Markdown with it for some elements. But on the whole, I think it's pretty nice. Okay, so these are free tools you could use. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
I didn't see any tables there, and I can tell you that tables are usually pain.
Okay, so let's do
Markdown?
in Markdown.
Yeah.
In Markdown, they are a pain.
Yeah, most of the time you kind of hack at it with embedded HTML.
Yeah, you can. In normal Markdown, you have to do embedded HTML.
Yeah.
but there are different Markdown flavors, and they do it all differently. So probably the most known flavor is GitHub Flavor Markdown,
And
which
they do
does it
have
like
tables.
this.
And yeah, they do have tables.
They do have tables. They just you just write ASCII art. What Mallard does, or what ducktype does, I hope I can remember it correctly. So you have a table, and then it has a table row, and then you can just use a list. Yeah. I think this syntax is pretty nice.
It's nice to use the Markdown because you don't have to move everything around when you
Yeah.
want to add
It's
have the longer
if you want to
word.
edit it, or if you want to embed some complex thing inside the table cell, then yeah, this is the way to go.
Yeah. It's quite nice.
Right? Any more questions? So,
When you use this Mallard,
yes?
when there's a whole graph interconnected pages, that's can be very difficult to maintain.
Very difficult to maintain. Well, they have some nice tools that show you a graph of the whole thing, for example. And I don't know. The GNOME docs use this, and that's a pretty big piece of docs. And they're apparently pretty happy with it, so I don't think this would be a problem. Obviously, I didn't use it for anything big. Also, I would say the tools for this are not very complete unless you have the same use cases as GNOME docs. For example, the viewer, I think, still only works on Linux, so you have to convert to HTML for other people to use it. But yeah, it's gonna get better. And yeah, I think it's the first format I've seen that really wants to make things nestable. Like really give the full power of the XML into a plain text format. And it also has it's also, I think it's nice to translate this. There are no tools to translate this because the duck type syntax is pretty new. But although the author didn't expect people to translate directly this, it's more suited to translation, I think, than, for example, restructured text. Because you can add additional elements in here. So, to finish up, if you want to start documenting something, or if you start a project and you want to document it, the thing you can do is what Mikey said, write the README first. Right, so let's say I'm doing a library, so I should go get the template. I didn't know about the template on the docs. That's really cool. So get the template, fill in whatever library does. For example, I had this. Like if you write something like this first, you'll figure out how you want to call your stuff, how the API is going to work. You will need to remember to make it easy for the user to use, not make it super complex and powerful, and then only the person who wrote it can understand. And also you can just copy-paste it into your tests if it comes to that. Yeah, so if you take anything from these ramblings, write the README first. It really helps. Okay, any more questions? Thank you.
If anyone wants, we have some Mallard balls or stress balls. We have a few.